Hello and welcome back to my channel. Today we're doing research issues, which is the last subtopic from chapter 2, methods of research. So I have previously done a video on types of data, methods, and research design and approaches to sociological research, and I suggest if you haven't watched those first, you pause this video, watch those first, and then come back to this one. So the topics we're going to look at today are theoretical considerations, practical considerations, and ethical considerations to choose topic, methods, and carrying out the research in general, and then how research findings may be biased, and we're going to remind ourselves what validity, reliability, and objectivity means. So on the choice of topic, the theoretical considerations that might affect like why a researcher chooses a topic is like their goal, like what their goal is in the research. So if they want to test a hypothesis, the topic will more likely be narrower in scope, and if it's to explain behavior, it will be a wider topic. It's also influenced by what is worthy of being studied, which in turn is like determined by like what researchers have already studied and what's like popular in like like what a lot of people and researchers are interested in studying right now in the current like present moment. What universities and governments are also interested. Some universities might be like specialized in some areas of research, and if researchers belong to those universities, then they might be influenced by that. And then practical, some topics are more likely to gain funding than others. And this is particularly like with governments, which are like one of the biggest bodies of funding. They're more likely, for example, to give funding to researchers that are investigating social issues because that will allow them to make better policies. And they're probably less likely to give funding if an issue being researched is likely to lead to criticism of their policies. But again, and this kind of overlaps a bit with the previous one, but like universities who specialize in some topic, like in some areas, might also be more likely to give funding if the researcher chooses those topics. Then there's like the practical consideration of like what the researcher is interested in, and also what is not already investigated or researched, but also something that already has a basis of research. Like it cannot be like researchers are not likely to choose a topic that has no previous research on because then they don't have any secondary sources, but they're also not likely to choose a topic that's very researched because then there's not much more to research on. And then the other practical like consideration would be if there's participants which want and can't cooperate. For example, like if they want to research an area in history, and obviously participants are all dead because it's like really long in the past, there has to be sources they can use to investigate that, or else like they can't choose that topic. Or if they want to investigate, like for example, let's say like a gang in the present moment, if they like that gang doesn't allow them to like to be researched, then the researcher might have to find another choice of topic, or another method in a way, like they could also do covered participant observation. But generally, yes, like that there has to be participants which are like available and who want to cooperate. And then lastly, ethical issues, like the main like one that would like affect choice of topic would be, is it ethical to study criminal behavior? Like ethical issues would like around topic would mainly be around topics that center like with gangs and criminal behavior, and like how ethical it is to investigate it rather than report it, and how ethical is it for the researcher to get involved. And we've already discussed that in other videos, but that would be the main one. So moving on to choice of method. So the theoretical considerations would be basically like summed up would be that interactionalists would prefer qualitative methods and positivists would prefer quantitative method. And that's because interactionalists are interested in descriptive accounts, which qualitative data provides, and positivists will prefer like establishing causality, so this causes this. So they're more likely to choose quantitative methods as well. Like interactionalists prefer validity, which qualitative methods give, and positivists prefer reliability, which quantitative methods provide. And then practical issues would be the researcher's skills. So if they're like scaled in one method rather than another, or in quantitative data versus qualitative methods, they're more likely to choose like whatever they feel more comfortable or have more experience in. Time as well, like some methods are more time consuming than others, like as we've seen, like interviews will be more time consuming than questionnaires, for example. Topic, like some topics just lend themselves better to some methods. For example, like if researchers want to study like a very sensitive topic, like say mental health issues or past traumas, they're more likely to gain more rapport and just it's more sensitive to do that with like unstructured interviews where like the researcher can build trust with the researcher, make them feel more comfortable, rather than a questionnaire that's sent out. Funding, again, like some methods are more expensive. For example, perhaps like if triangulation, well, that's not particularly a method, but that's more an approach. But like maybe like okay, let's see, an expensive method. Well, I can't think one on the top of my head now, but like some methods would be more expensive than others. Um, and then lastly, the size of group being studied as well. Like, if it's a smaller group, then they might do interviews. But if it's like a larger group, they might do group interview actually, or they might send questionnaires because it's very difficult to speak to so many people. Like, it would just take forever. And then ethical issues. Some researchers may believe some methods are unethical and then not choose them. Particularly, this would be with like Harvard participant observation, or laboratory experiments, even field experiments, because like the researcher, like in those cases, they don't tend to have like consent, or informed consent of the respondents, and the respondents might face harm, like mentally harm, especially in laboratory experiments and field experiments, and distress and etc. So moving on to ethical issues, the legal considerations that researchers would have to take is firstly, we've already briefly mentioned this, but like, is it ethical to observe criminal behavior? The researcher must have informed consent. Respondents must be aware of possible consequences of participating and cooperating. That means like um, that respondents must be aware of like if they take part in this like research, in this like experiment or in this observation, that they might change their behavior, that it might affect, like cause them distress, it might like cause them like secondary kind of effects, and they must be made aware of all of those possible risks, and agree to participate. And then lastly, like if researcher promises anonymity, then it must be kept. Safety, like no physical or mental harm can happen to participants. This would affect like both choice of topic and choice of method, like all of these in general, because like if like a topic is likely to like there's no way you can research it without causing mental and physical harm to participants, and researchers are not going to choose that topic. And then if a choice of method is likely to do that as well, like they're not likely to choose that because it's not ethical. And then the same with like the legal considerations, like if the researcher cannot have consent for their research because like it introduce bias, and then they might have to like not go for that topic because it's not ethical. And same with research methods, like all of these you can apply to both. And then lastly, like this is more general, but like ethical practice, in sociology, you must know that like results cannot be manipulated or falsificated, and they can't be plagiarism. So like if researchers use like sources from other sociologists, they must reference those. And then research topics in general have to be morally justified. Like there has to be a reason, like it has to benefit society to study them, or it has to be like for a good cause. Like in general, this is quite hard, and I don't think you don't really need to like this. You don't have to bring it really into like the sociology exam, but it's just like general knowledge. Like it says in the textbook. Yeah, they should be morally justified. So the exam questions you would have for these would basically be describe two ways in which either practical, theoretical, or ethical considerations might influence choice of research topic or method. And then you do like two paragraphs, and you make a point, you explain, you mention an example, which is the most important thing, and then you analyze that and like link it back to the question. And then you would have evaluate the view that practical or ethical or theoretical factors are the most important influence on choice of research method, which this would be an essay. And then you would have to like argue yes and have multiple paragraphs explaining why and bringing examples and like actual real studies. And then you would have to go against and like criticize what you previously said, maybe talk about how other factors are more important. So for example, the question is like about practical factors being most important, then you can mention like no, actually ethical are more important or theoretical are more important, and bring arguments for those. But I would also recommend like directly going against practical, like mentioning the flaws in like the practical ones, like direct criticism, as well as like not just juxtaposing to like the two like or three different ones, but like also criticizing the one that you previously argued yes. And then in the conclusion you sum up and you say your opinion. And usually it should be like you should already state in the introduction which one you actually believe is more important, and so throughout the essay, you keep going back to that one. But I'll do, I think after like finishing unit 2, I'll do a video on paper 1, like tips and advice, and maybe go through some examples of essay questions answers to more explain what I'm saying, because it can be very, very confusing if I like don't mention an example. So next we're going to look at bias in topic. Topic, researchers' personal values and what they consider important, and their personal views about danger and difficulty can affect the topic they go for. So again, personal values, like say they are religious, they might want to then study religion, or say that they're vegetarian or vegan, they might want to study that. So like basically values like what they care about, what they believe, again what they consider important, and then the views about danger and difficulty would be, for example, like if they don't like danger and difficulty, they might not go for more dangerous methods like participation, where you have to like join a group and like you risk being part of the group in the end, like becoming part of the story, or you risk being found out. And depending on the groups you join, like this is typically done with gang groups, it might just be dangerous in general because they're like typically violent people. So they might not go for that and maybe go for um, methods that like you can get consent from the people, like interviews, group interviews, and longitudinal studies and things like that. And then those who might fund it might have a say on what is being studied and how, and that can also introduce bias because they might have a like approach they want to research what they're researching. They might already they might just want to prove something that they already believe. So in that case, bias is there already, because like they kind of already have the result they want to find, and then researchers kind of feel pressure to reach that result that they're like being asked to find. Then research method. Again, personal views about danger and difficulty also affect research method as well as topic. And then again, the funding body might have views over reliability and validity, so they might be like, oh, you can study this, but it has to be with quantitative methods only or with qualitative methods only because we believe that these are more valuable. Especially with universities, this would be the case. Um, and then just using one research method, like for example, if you only use qualitative methods, you kind of don't have the same reliability. So that kind of introduces bias in a way. And if you use quantitative ones, you don't have much validity. Like if you use both, it would be better. So you can argue there's bias in that. And then results, values also influence data analysis, and especially like what is included and excluded from final research. This is again back to like the government. They might not want to publish findings that would lead to criticisms of their policies. Like they might just be like, oh, okay, this is really good. You found this. We're going to take this into consideration, but just publish this part of the research that you found out. But even universities may do that. And then how values influence data analysis, like researchers might choose to like interpret some data in some way because they're biased, or they might get conclusions out of data that are subjective. Like it involves a degree of subjectivity to like be like, okay, these are the findings, this is my conclusion. So the subjectivity there, if there's like, it's very likely that the researcher is biased and makes conclusions out of them with bias. So the exam questions with like bias and topic would be explain two ways researchers might be biased when choosing a research topic and or research method. Sorry, it's not written there. So you would have to like give a point, like well, 2 points, obviously in two different paragraphs, and then most importantly, the example. Again, it's 4 lines per paragraph, so like point, explain the example, and link it back, and then explain two ways the values of the sociologist may lead to bias in research findings. And again, like you would just have to explain 2 points and give examples. The examples are quite straightforward, like you can pretty much like imagine them for yourselves. So I would suggest maybe as revision, you could just kind of like brainstorm a couple of like examples that you think for each of these actually, just to have like in preparation for exams, and maybe attempt to try to like put it into like the 4 line paragraphs. But again, I could do maybe one of these questions in the next video, just to explain more. So for this unit, the sociologist, it works quite differently to other units. Like in general units, like the family, education, the religion, all those, you would have sociologists from different perspectives, like functionalists, feminists, Marxists, etc., giving their opinion on like those social institutions. And you would have to know like many sociologists, because usually you'll be asked like to analyze those topics with like different perspectives like those, and then you would have to like obviously reference the sociologists from those school of thoughts. But for this unit, like here I have a couple, but like what you have to know instead, rather than sociologists from different perspectives, is real life examples of research methods. So that when you bring in your examples, specifically for the essays, because for the like paragraph questions, examples would be more likely like you just like not making up, but like you bringing in, like for example, if a research did this method and this would happen, that kind of example. But like for essays, when you're talking about research methods, you would have to like you would be expected, or at least to get the top marks, to bring real life examples of those methods to explain the limitations, the advantages, the reliability, validity of the methods, etc. So what I mean, like I'll give the two examples that I have here. For example, Milgram did this study in it's called, I think it's like, I don't exactly know what the study. I think it's just Milgram experiment, but it was a experiment to like find out like unethical behavior and the effect of being given power. So basically, the experiment was like some respondents were convinced they were giving electrical shocks to learners whenever they gave a wrong answer, which they were told to do, but not shocks. No shocks were like being given. The learners were just pretending to like be receiving the electrical shocks when they did the wrong answers. Like the learners were actually like part of the research, like they worked with the researchers. Um, but many respondents actually broke down in the face of the pain they were believed they were causing. Like the research was investigating like what would happen if people are giving this sort of power and they're told to like it was to study obedience. Like they're told to do this. Like would they keep on doing this or would they stop? Like it was to study that. And basically, this study is an example of a laboratory experiment, but most importantly, it's an example of unethical behavior. So if you're talking about unethical issues and you're talking about, like, for example, one of the ethical issues is causing distress to participant or like secondary effects and like distress and like trauma, you would be, for example, Milgram's experiment, like, and then you would explain what happened. And like, this is an example of unethical behavior. And then Venkatesh also did, he studied like a gang. He did a covered participant observation. Um, and well, his gang study was in Chicago. It took around 8 years. And what you would mention with this example is like if you're talking about practical issues and you're talking about time, you can say, for example, Venkatesh gang study took around 8 years to like he carried it out throughout 8 years. So that shows how much time some research methods can take. So ideally, you would have to have like a couple of these, and I might link a video below of and it's another video from another channel of sociology, and like the woman goes through like different examples of like research methods. So I might link that below, and you can just take notes of those to bring in essays, because you should ideally know a couple for each like issue. Um, and yeah, a couple of each research even. Like these will always come in handy for like any research method question in the exams. And then finally, I do have like kind of more theoretical one, which is Aykroyd and Huge. I think that's how you pronounce the names, but I'm not sure. This is practically the only theoretical one I found in the chapter. And they argue that methods should not be seen as tools that are somewhat appropriate or inappropriate for particular tasks. So what this means is that like there's no rule out there that says, oh, this method should be used for this. Like it is very subjective, and it really depends of like who the participants are, what the point, like what the research is. Like it's not straightforward, so that means that the researchers must really, really think carefully, and it will vary with each topic method, a topic, each research topic. Sorry, yeah, and it's not very straightforward. Like it will like a lot of things have to be taken into consideration for what method to use, and it's not like this method should be used for this. There's not like that. It's researchers must really, it really depends on the research. I hope this makes sense. And yes, that's the end of this video. I hope you found it useful, and please like and subscribe. Let me know down below if you would be interested in an exam technique video for paper one and examples. And I know many of you have been asking like if I'm going to be posting regularly, and I will be trying to do a video each Saturday, but again, I don't promise anything. Um, but I think that's what I'm gonna try to keep to. So yeah, thank you for watching this video, and again, I really hope you found it useful.